Welcome back to the 2024 edition of Pure Picks. My name is James, and I'll be your host for this evening's video. Here, joined by my man Top G, Gerard. How are you doing tonight, Gerard, in 2024?
I'm doing well. I'm doing well. I'm ready for this year.
I'm
Start it
ready
off.
too. Yeah, let's start off with a bang. Let's start off with a dub, some profit, some green. And before we get started, I think that Gerard wanted to recap a little bit about our last video. I think that he wanted to point out something, so I'll hand it off to Gerard here.
Yeah, so our last video, our boy Kevin, our friend and co-founder of Pure Picks, he put up 40 bands to win almost 6 bands. And I just wanted to mention that everyone's unit size is different here. So we're not advising people to throw in the mortgage or the rent money into these bets. And um, usually a good sign of a good unit size is if you're not emotionally attached to how much you're betting. So that's one thing to take note. And yeah, I just wanted to throw that out there. That was a big win for Kevin. And obviously his unit sizing is different from most people. So I just wanted to mention that.
Yeah, great point. And that's something that we just wanted to point out. But hey, all props to him. 40 G's to win 6K. That's a big ball move right there. So let's get started in terms of just the new year. UFC Fight Night and Ankalaev versus Walker 2 is going to be the rematch from the no contest that they had earlier last year. And I'm really excited to get some picks going, get some predictions going, because I do see a few spots after just looking at a high level view of his cards. I feel like there's a few spots out here that we could play that could get us some good plays and good profit. So let's get started. First fight that we have on the prelims, this will be Felipe Bunes versus Joshua Van, our guy. We got to mention him, the Van train. So Felipe Bunes, he is 13-6. He is 3-2 in his last five. I believe that this will be his UFC debut. I believe that he was also scheduled to fight Zalgas last year, but from what I've gathered, I think he like failed a drug test or something like that. So this might be a guy that's
Uh-oh.
on some juice. And but now he got suspended for like a few months, and now he's back. So he's gonna fight Josh Van, who I believe is coming off a short notice here in the fight. Felipe is 34 years old, 5'7", 71-inch reach. Fighting against Joshua Van, 9-1. He's 5-0 in his last five, coming off that decision victory over Kevin Borjas. He is 22 years old, so he will be the younger fighter here, and he will be the shorter fighter and have a 6'5" reach compared to Bunes's 71-inch reach. Just to tell the odds for the fight so far, as of today, January 8th, Joshua Van opened up at a minus 250. He then got bet to a minus 300 at his peak, but he has since been bet down to a minus 210. So there has been some dog action on Felipe since Joshua Van became a minus 300 favorite. Gerard, I will let you kick off the first breakdown and prediction of the new year. What do you think about this fight between Felipe Bunes and Josh Van?
Yeah, this is going to be a good fight. And I like Josh Van here, but there's some few points I like to take a note of here. Felipe Bunes, he is a slick kickboxing early on, and I do see that he is hittable when he is pressured, and we're gonna see that from Josh Van. He's gonna put on that pace, that pressure that we've seen from his last fight. He has that clean boxing and those varied attacks. He likes to go to the body and has the occasional head kick ready if he chooses to. And what I was most impressed with Josh Van was that he was able to adapt throughout the fight. So he lost that first round. He got dropped a little bit, and then second round he adjusted, and it was just domination from second and third round on. So I like to see that in fighters. And as for Felipe Bunes, he kind of fights off the back foot. Um, he does have the range, so he could use that to try to keep Josh Van away from him. But I think Josh Van's just riding this momentum and he's only improving. He's still so young and he looks like he belongs in this game. So yeah, I got Josh Van here and I'm like a medium to high confidence on this fight.
Awesome, awesome. And do you think that Josh Van potentially could be a parlay piece, perhaps, or how confident, I guess, are you in Josh Van as a play?
Yeah, for me personally, I have him in some parlays. Yeah. Yeah, he's in my parlays for
Fantastic.
sure.
Awesome. Yeah, I agree with many points in your breakdown. Yeah, just starting off with Felipe first. I also actually think that he's a solid all-around fighter himself. He mainly does use more jiu-jitsu combined with a decent striking. I think that his striking is probably just average at the UFC level. He does have decent power. I think that he does have okay kicks as well, but he tends to be a little low volume, which I don't like out of flyweights. Now, going back to his jujitsu, he does have a black belt. I think he prefers to use that in fights rather than just strike. He gets really good at attacking subs, can throw up triangles, arm bars. I think that he's also active off his back, so he is a sub threat if he gets taken down, and he'll play that jujitsu game on the ground. And compared to other just straight Brazilian jiu-jitsu fighters, I think that he is able to mix in striking to work his way into takedowns. The one part that I saw that I don't like about Felipe is that he's 2-4 in decisions. He's 34 years old. He seems to get the short end of the stick in that area. And, you know, usually fighters don't get better as they age, right? And I feel like, especially as a flyweight, 34, that's a pretty bad sign that he's 2-4 in decisions. And I think it's just the opposite of a guy like Josh Van, who extremely talented MMA fighter. He's mainly a striker, boxer, but he does have the skill set to do everything. He has really good slick boxing, nice high tight guard. He can throw good 1-2s and has quick feints. I also think that he can throw the head kicks and kicks when you least expect it and just can pour on combos with his gas tank. I really think that he's that next generation that can do pretty much everything at a B or above level and can get better and better. I mean, this guy's only 22 years old. His gas tank might be, aside from his boxing, they're really close, but I think his gas tank is probably his best attribute because he can really pour it on later in rounds. We saw in his last fight against Kevin Borjas, he lost that first round. I mean, I think that he potentially got rocked against Kevin. Kevin's a good striker himself. He lost that first round, and I was very worried. I thought that he was gonna get knocked out later because it just didn't look good for him. But he showed a lot of grit and heart, durability, and of course the aforementioned gas tank, and really outstruck, came back strong against Kevin Borjas, took those 2 and 3 rounds. I mean, like he just took the later rounds pretty easily. And I also like that he not only attacked the head, but he was attacking the body too, which is a great sign because this guy has fight IQ. He knew that if you attack the body, it'll make Kevin more tired, have less pop in those shots coming at him. So I really like his fight IQ for being age 22. Even in that Zalgas fight, I really like that he only was taken down 1 out of 5 times and showed solid takedown defense. So if Bunes tries to, let's say, hold him against the cage and go for takedowns, I believe that he will be able to hold that off because he did well against Zalgas in that fight. Now, I also think that Josh Van is just one of those guys. The only hesitation I have for this is that he is coming in short notice, but I really think that he is that much better and more talented than his opposition in this fight. And that's why I'm riding with the Van train one more time. Sign me up for Josh Van. I think this guy's a parlay piece. I'll go Van by decision. I think that he'll most likely outstrike Bunes over the course of 3 rounds. He might get a KO, but I lean towards decision here. I think he's just going to outwork and outstrike him, stuff the takedown, sprawl brawl his way into victory. So banned by decision, parlay piece, sign me up. Let's move on to the next fight that we have on the prelims. It is going to be Tom Nolan versus Nikolas Motta. Tom Nolan, the big train, he is 6-0. He is 5-0 in his last five. He's coming off of that Dana White Contender Series win knockout in the first round. He is fighting against Nikolas Motta, 13-5. He's coming off of a draw against Trey Ogden, or no contest, a premature stoppage, pretty much. I mean, if you did watch the fight, though, he pretty much got subbed in the third round, I believe, by Trey Ogden. I think like we were both. You were probably on Trey Ogden too, but I think we were all on Trey Ogden in that fight. And yeah, unfortunately, we didn't cash those like Trey Ogden by we had like some props on him too, and that was just some bad reffing. We need to audit that. We need the UFC needs to see what happened there because Trey Ogden was winning that fight. I believe he was like up on the judges' scorecard for at least two of them, like 2-0. So yeah, unfortunately, it was a no contest, I guess. He's 30 years old. I think Tom Nolan will be making his UFC debut in this fight. He's going to be the much longer fighter, taller fighter here, as you can see. Odds for this fight right now, Tom Nolan, he's a minus 330. So he opened up at a minus 210. And people have been riding the Tom Nolan train ever since. I mean, his nickname is Big Train for a reason. So I guess people are kind of shoving him in that regard. I'll go ahead and kind of start off this. I mean, Tom Nolan, from the limited kind of tape that I did see of him, he's a good striker, high volume and pace. I also think that he's able to work in combos pretty well. Not only can he kind of kickbox, he also shows some good solid knees as well. So I think that he's pretty all well-rounded striker in that sense. He also has some decent jiu-jitsu skills, uses his reach and length pretty well in grappling exchanges. Once he gets on top, I think that his ground and pound is actually pretty good. Can throw in some elbows as well. And I also like the fact that he knows how to use his reach and length on the ground to be able to perform chokes, right? So I like that he's kind of well-rounded, but he's a more of a striker through and through. And this matchup, I think, is going to be a mainly striking matchup because Motta is also a good striker himself, pretty explosive with his strikes. I think Motta has a good power behind his strikes as well, and you can use a really patient approach at times and kind of wait for a time to explode in flurries and kill shots. And that sometimes leads to him losing fights because I think that he doesn't have the best striking defense and durability to play that game of that waiting game. He either smokes his opponents or his opponent smokes him, as you saw in his last fight. So, I mean, Motta was outstruck by Trey Ogden in his last fight, right? I mean, that's not a good sign. I don't think Ghost Samurai is the best striker in the division, but he was outstruck by Trey Ogden. I feel like Tom's just going to be the much better striker here. Tom does have below average takedown defense. He'll get taken down, but I just don't think that'll matter much against a guy like Nikolas Motta, who's going to be smaller than him frame wise. And I just don't think Motta is like a grappler or a wrestler. He's not going to be able to kind of impose his will in that sense. Also, another thing that I don't like about Motta, he seems to have low fight IQ and not good cardio, especially in the last fight. Ever since he got starched by Jim Miller and Miguel Torres, I just feel like this guy's chin has gone down and he's a little more hesitant. And you saw that in the last fight, right? Trey Ogden was just kind of piecing this guy up. Didn't really have an answer for Trey Ogden. So more hesitant, less durable. That's not a good recipe for success in the UFC. My pick here is Tom Nolan by KO. I could see a sub and club even, but I'll hold off on making a play here as it is Tom's UFC debut. Motta does have UFC experience, albeit he's been losing a lot so far. But I just remember the fight against Zach Reese and Cody Brundage, right? I mean, like Cody was getting his ass beat left and right by a lot of guys, and this new prospect came out, bigger, taller version, and Zach Reese just got slammed on his head pretty much. So yeah, I think that I'll hold off on the play. I'll just kind of watch this to see how Tom does. But pick here is Tom by KO. Gerard, what do you think about this fight between Tom Nolan and Nikolas Motta here?
Yeah, Motta, I thought he had like some solid stand-up potential. in these fights, but he continues to kind of underwhelm a lot of these fights. And that Ogden fight, Ghost Samurai, I'll give Trey Ogden his flowers. He kind of gets people to turn into ghosts in these fights. They all trying to they kind of never get into rhythm against Trey Ogden, so I'll give him that. But yeah, it didn't really look good for Motta there. And I'll give Motta that he'll have the experience advantage, and he's seen past round one more than Tom Nolan. So if this goes past round one, maybe Motta has a chance here. Um, I am gonna be picking Tom Nolan here. Now, Motta did knock out Van Camp, who was a pretty big stature, who's like 6'2", Tom Nolan 6'3". But one difference here is that Tom Nolan's much quicker, and I think he's much more dangerous, and he throws a lot of wild shots at you. So that's a big danger factor that Van Camp didn't have against Motta, where Motta was using that counter left hook. Um, Now, yeah, the only thing that I kind of worry here is Tom Nolan's inexperience past round one, but then again, that might not matter in this fight against Motta, but you never know. Motta's has multiple UFC fights already, and this is a debut fighter, Tom Nolan. Like you said, look what happened with Zachary's.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's kind of had like the same confidence sentiment among the MMA betting space. But yeah, I think Tom Nolan's wildness could possibly just get him the KO here. But for now, I'm gonna be staying away. I think I have more confident spots on this card than this fight, but my pick is still Tom Nolan.
Yeah, I'm in total agreement. I mean, these Dana White Contender Series alums, I mean, they're very hit and miss sometimes. So we'll see how this fight plays out and just kind of analyze it for the next time these guys fight, right? Maybe we could ride Tom Nolan next time, fade him. Same goes with Nicholas Motta. I think this is more of an informational fight rather than something that you must put a play on for this fight. So let's move on to the next fight on the prelims. It's going to be Westin Wilson versus John Silva. And this is going to be another um, intriguing matchup because Silva is the biggest favorite on the card. Just to give you guys a little bit spoiler alert of the odds. So Westin Wilson, he's 16-8. He is 3-2 in his last five. He is coming off of that um, beating KO loss against Joanderson Brito. He is 34 years old. He's fighting against John Silva, 11-2. He's 5-0 in his last five. He's coming off of that Dana White Contender Series victory, via decision. He's going to be the younger fighter here at 27 and just the shorter and kind of has a 4-inch reach disadvantage as well, as you guys can see there. The odds for this fight, though, let me just tell you, the odds are really, really wide for this fight. John Silva now is even a minus 900. I think that it's not loading up right now, but I believe that he opened up at like a minus 350 or something like that when I first saw it. Yeah, he opened up at minus 350, and now he's a minus 900. So people have just been hammering this guy, and I don't blame them really. So Gerard, I'll let you go ahead and break down this fight before I kind of interject. What do you think about this fight between Wilson and Silva here?
Yeah. So John Silva, he probably should win. I mean, but for me personally, this is like unbettable for me. So from just looking from his last fight, he did look like he was like starting pretty slow in that fight, and he wasn't as aggressive or pressuring too hard that compared to what we saw from Joe Anderson Brito against Westin Wilson. So we might not see that early on, which is what I'm worried about. And John Silva, he might be kind of overrated, maybe overly confident. I'm not so sure how quality of his wins are so far. Um, and from his last fight, I mean, he looked like he might get too patient when he can just easily steamroll if he decides to be aggressive early. And for Westin Wilson, he has the length advantage. He has his karate stance or style can maybe frustrate John Silva early on. Um, and if Westin Wilson can make it uneventful and make it a slow fight to start, he might have a chance here. Um, but yeah, if Weston Wilson can keep Silva out of range for most of the fight and make it slow, do his Trey Ogden impression early on in this fight, get Silva out of rhythm, there I could see a path for an upset for Weston here. And also, which is why I'm just staying away from this fight. And I don't know, maybe if Josh Van wins early on this card, maybe I'll sprinkle a little bit on Weston Wilson just for giggles. But yeah, I'm staying away, but John Silva should win here.
Definitely. Yeah, I mean, Silva, he's actually, I think, a pretty decent striker at the UFC level. I think he is above average. He has good power, pressures forward pretty well, keeps coming at you. I also think that he's pretty accurate with his shots and really quick with his kicks as well. He also has good movement and is light on his feet. The only hesitancy that I have about his movement, his stance, is that he does keep his hands low from time to time. He does fight with a pretty good guard, but sometimes he just drops his hands if he, kind of wants to be a little bit more aggressive. He does have two sub wins, both for them by a pretty quick guillotine. But aside from those quick subs, he hasn't really shown too much in terms of grappling. But he does have that in his back pocket if needed. And I mean, he's fighting against a guy, Weston Wilson, pretty tall featherweight with a long frame and reach. I think that Wilson, unfortunately, is a below average striker, though. He likes to use those straight shots and kind of blitz his opponents. I believe he trains out of Wonder Boy's camp in South Carolina. So he kind of fights like Wonder Boy, light in his footwork, karate kind of style with a side to side movement. But unfortunately, he just does not have the skills of a Wonder Boy. Keeps his hands pretty low. The way he fights, it just seems like a guy that is begging to get KO'd. Unfortunately, he's tall, long, hands low, leaves his chin up way too much. So I think that's where his detriment's going to come from in this fight. Now, surprisingly, he has pretty good jiu-jitsu skills. I think he's pretty active in scrambles and off his back. He uses his frame and length well. Really goes for the subs when he is in grappling exchanges, able to cinch up those chokes with his long arms. So he does have 16 wins in his career, and 11 of them are by submission. So he does know how to choke people. But he also just does not have good wrestling and takedowns to get the fight to the ground. So I think that he's going to more so wait and is going to be more opportune with those subs. But the most likely outcome for this fight that I see happening is Silva is just going to sprawl and brawl his way to decision victory, or most likely a KO, in my opinion. So Silva by KO, I think that's what's going to happen. I agree with you that this is minus 900. I mean, that's pretty steep. Like, I was looking at the odds yesterday, it was only like minus 800. Even then, I was like, man, this is pretty high for a guy like John Silva, who might not be like too high level in the UFC, right? But in this matchup, I think that he's gonna probably look high level. So that's gonna be my pick, but I'm not playing it. I mean, the once you start getting to like minus 900, 800, it just adds less juice on your play, and sometimes the juice is not worth the squeeze in that sense. So I'm probably going to stay away from this and just wait till Wilson gets knocked out and move on to the next fight.
Unless it's Bo Nickel.
Yeah, I mean, I'm fine with Bo Nickel, right? Because at least he has shown that he has won in the UFC. John Silva, I mean, this is going to be his UFC debut, right? So it's
Yeah.
tough, man. It's tough. And Bo Nickel obviously has a lot more credentials. So, I mean, we'll see what happens. Yeah, but yeah, I'm staying away from this and just kind of waiting for it to end probably. Let's go on to the next fight here that we have on the prelims. It is going to be the return of Farid Basharat versus Taylor Lupinas. Now, Farid, he's 11-0, undefeated. He's 5-0 in his last five. He's coming off of that arm triangle choke against Clayson Rodriguez in round one, I believe. He is 26 years old. He's going to be fighting Taylor Lapilus, 19-3, 5-0 in his last five. He's coming off that decision victory over Calvin Longren. He's 31 years old, so he'll be the older fighter here. And in terms of height and reach, they both have 2 inch, give or take, each way for the height and reach. Odds for this fight right now, Farid is a minus 300, and he actually opened up at minus 300, so not too much movement long term. I will say that once he opened up at minus 300, he did. This line movement's kind of been all over the place. He did get bet down to minus 335 at one point, but then he was also bet to minus 170 and has since settled back down to minus 300. So it's kind of interesting line movement there, if I do say so myself. For this fight, I mean, man, I think Farid is the definition of just a solid all around UFC fighter. Solid striking skills, good volume on the feet, targets the head, body, and legs, something that I really like to see from fighters. And he's really great with his kicks that are quick and snappy. The only thing that I don't like about his striking is that he just seems like he doesn't have too much power. So he's more of a decision fighter in terms of striking. He does have good footwork, movement in the cage, moves side to side really well. I also think that this is his best attribute. He does a great job of mixing in his grappling and truly knows how to attack his opponent's weakness. We saw that in the last fight, right? He was using his size and grappling ability against a guy like Clayson Rodriguez, who's a dangerous striker. He does it really well in setting up his takedowns with his striking, able to sprawl takedowns from his opponents. So he's just well rounded all over the place in terms of grappling. Once he's on the ground, Farid has great top control and can easily finish the fight there easily. I mean, you saw what happened in the last fight. He just transitioned to an arm triangle pretty easily. Farid also has cardio to last all 3 rounds, so that's another positive attribute I like about him. In regards to Taylor, I mean, he's a good kickboxer. I actually do like how clean he fights. He can work his way into clean combos, able to use kicks and punches together. Pretty crafty guy. He's also able to counter his opponents if they just come in striking, like you saw in the last fight against Callan. Now, Taylor just does not have much offensive grappling, but I think that he is solid with his takedown defense, and that is proven to be true because he has an 81% takedown defense. However, once his opponent does take him down and is relentless enough to take him down, he does have a tendency to get grounded by them, from what I've seen. I do see Farid starting off the fight striking with Taylor, making him comfortable. He might not be able to match Taylor's striking, but then I think that he's going to lull Taylor into a sense of security and start attacking Taylor's weakness of being grounded. And I feel like he's going to take him down and either control him to a decision or potentially even pick up sub. So pick here is Farid by decision or sub. I've seen a lot of love for Taylor on social media, MMA social media, and I just don't get it. I'm going with Farid here. So give him to me minus 300. I think he's a potential parlay piece, and yeah, I'm happy to buy stuff. I'm in some parlays. Gerard, what do you think about this fight between Farid and Taylor here?
Yeah, this fight, Farid, he might be one of the most complete fighters on this card from what I see. He he's pretty solid everywhere. Um, Pretty complete MMA game. He has tight defense, pretty disciplined, and he should win, I think, if he threatens Lapilus in all facets of the game, grappling, striking, mixing it up. What I will say though is Taylor, he is a decent striker. He's pretty good, and he has really, like you said, solid takedown defense. Um, but I think from what I see here on this card, I think Taylor might be like the better one of the better underdogs who's facing a pretty strong favorite who's minus 200 plus favorite here. And I think he's a pretty formidable underdog here. But Farid, I think Farid's game is just too complete, and he could decide to. He has the style that can get to the weaknesses of his opponents, and we see that fight IQ in him. That's how he usually game plans for, and that yeah, he's kind of a chameleon that he could do that
Mm.
with how solid he is everywhere. So yeah, my pick here is Farid, but Taylor's more one of the more formidable underdogs on this card, I'd say.
Yeah, I'm in agreement with most of your points. And one thing I also want to mention is that Taylor has fought in the UFC before, I believe. I think that this is like his second
Yeah.
stint, if you will. So this guy is through and through a UFC veteran. So good opponent for Farid, definitely. But I do think that Farid is, I think he's the real deal, honestly. So we'll see what happens. I mean, I think it's going to be a fun fight. And yeah, next fight that we have on the prelims, this is going to be another entertaining fight. Marcus McGhee versus Gaston Bolanos. Marcus McGhee, he's 8-1, 4-1 in last five, and he's coming off of that KO victory over JP Buys in the first round, I believe. So it's a pretty quick finish. He's fighting against Gaston Bolanos, 7-3. He is 3-2 in his last five, coming off that decision victory over Aaron Phillips, I believe 7 months ago, and that was his UFC debut, I believe. And in terms of the odds right now, this has gotten pretty interesting. So Marcus McGhee, he's minus 375 opened at those odds, and now he's a minus 260. So people have been taking some dog action on Gaston. Gerard, I'll let you start off the breakdown between these two men. What do you think about Marcus McGhee and Gaston Bolanos here?
I think both of these guys have pretty good striking. McGee, I think he has a wrestling background. Um, McGee, I think he's probably the better, more dangerous boxer here if we're just talking about the hands in boxing. And Gaston, he's a pretty seasoned Muay Thai and kickboxing striker. He has some nice strikes, but one thing that is a big hole in his game is his grappling, which can be used to make him he has trouble there is what I'm trying to say. Can't talk right now. Yeah, and his jujitsu, I don't really see too much in his grappling and jujitsu. And we've seen McGee, he can mix it up. He can take your back. He can go for submissions, and even we can even see a club and sub here for McGee. And I think McGee's a pretty heavy favorite right now, and he's also going to be my pick here. I just think he is a more complete MMA fighter. He has a more complete bag, and Gaston, I think he just has a big hole in his game where I think McGee can hold his own in the stand up against Gaston, and there's just a big hole in Bolaños' grappling and jiu-jitsu, which McGee can attack. So my pick here is McGee, and I do have him in some parlays.
Okay. Yeah, I tend to agree with some of what you were saying. I think that Marcus is another solid all-around fighter that the UFC has found. He made a lot of noise in the UFC last year, coming off of two straight finishes. And I think he just came in straight up as like a debut and kind of beat Journey Newsom and then beat JP Buys. Two guys have fought in the UFC before, so he made a lot of noise last year. He's a slightly above average striker to me. He does have heavy hands, decent hand speed, able to pressure forward and work in those boxing combos. I think he's mainly a boxer as a striker. He's also a good grappler from what I've seen, able to scramble, use his sweeps really well. he has the ability to end fights with subs, like his club and sub Journey Newsom in his UFC debut. Um, so yeah, we haven't really seen him use too much grappling because maybe the fights and matchups hasn't called for it, but I think he does have that in his arsenal. Gaston is more one-sided in his approach. He's a high-level Muay Thai kickboxing style striker, above average power. I think that he does have some pretty dynamic shots, pretty flashy stuff that comes from different angles. He does a really good job of pulling off spinning attacks as well. So he's a pretty good striker. He does have a tendency to be a little wild in his attacks, which leads him to trouble, or it could either hurt his opponents pretty badly. The one hole in his game that you mentioned is that it is his grappling. I mean, he was taken down 3 out of 5 times in his UFC debut last year and controlled for 6 minutes. I will say that although this did not lead him to lose, though, he still thoroughly outstruck his opponent, Aaron Phillips, 130-27 on two judges' scorecard and 29-28 on another. So, he does have a hole, but he still won that fight, which is something that's a good sign for me. Now, Marcus, I do think that he has Gaston covered in the grappling department. He may be able to find a sub if he follows a more grappling centric game plan. However, the one worry that I have is that given his success in the UFC thus far, he may attempt to stand with Gaston, believe it or not. And if he does that, I think this is going to be more of a 50-50 fight. What my gut is telling me is that I think that Marcus will be smart and try to continue his win streak. He'll try to take Gaston down more of a grappling focused game plan. However, I just can't trust him 100% to do that because I feel like once some of these fighters who are more of like grappling based fighter, right? He comes from more of a wrestling background. Once they fall in love with their hands, they really like to fall in love with their hands. So I think that the pick here is going to be Marcus by decision, maybe even a club and sub, but I think I'm staying away from this because I could easily see this getting into a firefight where it's more 50-50. And in that 50-50 shot, I think Gaston has more dynamic striking prowess that might cause some trouble for Marcus. So I'm just going to stay away and watch this fight and see how it plays out, potentially future data for the next fight. Moving on to the next fight here that we have on the prelims, we have Preston Parsons versus Matheus Semelsberger, Semi the Jedi. Matheus Semelsberger, 11-6. He is 2-3 in his last 5. He's coming off of that KO loss against Uros Medic. He's fighting against Preston Parsons, 10-4. He is 3-2 in his last 5. He's coming off that close split decision loss against Trevin Giles. And the odds for this fight right now is really intriguing here. So Matheus Semelsberger, he's minus 132. And I think that he's coming into this fight on like short notice, I believe. I might have to check that later, but I think he's coming in short
Yeah.
notice. He opened up at a plus 130 and he instantly was hammered to a minus 135. So people took the dog action right away on Matheus Semelsberger, Semi the Jedi. Now he's a minus 132. So interesting, odd kind of flip movement there. Gerard, I'll let you break down this fight first. What do you think about this fight between Semi the Jedi and Preston Parsons here?
Now, originally when I saw that Semelsberger was going to be fighting Parsons, I thought the same thing. I was like, yeah, let me pick Semelsberger. He looks good in the stand-up. He has the longer reach. We've seen him drop his opponents multiple times. But in those fights, he finds a way to just give the win to the other guy, even though he damaged them. So that's like a hard thing to remember when you're gonna put money on a guy like that. He just hands the win over. So it's kind of iffy. I can see that the odds are still pretty close, but yeah, people hammered the guy who looks like he'll do the more damage. But I think even with the reach advantage, he's still pretty hittable. He does have that big right hand, but he hasn't been able to use it to find a finish. just rock people and drop them. Um, One thing that I'm worried about for Semelsberger is that he is short notice, and I don't know if he'll have the grappling cardio for this fight going up against Preston Parsons, who's most likely going to use that wrestling. Uh, One thing that I do like about Preston Parsons that he does look like he's a dog in there. Like he'll fight through exhaustion, he'll fight through adversity, and I like that in fighters. His stand up, Parsons' stand up is not that good, but I will say that he does have sneaky counter punching and sneaky power. So that's one thing to note. And I think Semelsberger is hittable, and Parsons may be able to connect, even though he's outgunned in terms of striking. Now, for the grappling, I think the grappling is going to be a big thing here for Preston Parsons. He's going to have the advantage, and he can use that to tire out Semi the Jedi and take off that steam on that big right hand that Semelsberger has. And originally, I wanted to pick Semelsberger, but just remembering how his fights play out, and especially against a dog like Preston Parsons, if this goes past round one, I think Parsons has a lot of the advantage here, and especially if you see wrestling involved. So I kind of flipped from Semelsberger to Parsons here because I think I see a clearer path to victory on short notice for Preston Parsons than Semi the Jedi Semelsberger. So Preston Parsons is my pick and possibly my underdog of the card.
Got it. Yeah, it could be a decent underdog play. I mean, right now he's plus 112, so not too bad there. I agree with you also. I think that this fight is kind of tricky. You can go back or forth between each fighter depending on how you see this fight playing out. I think that Parsons is a somewhat dangerous grappler. I mean, he has a jiu-jitsu black belt, can work in good takedowns as well. He has a solid wrestling base. He's able to chain wrestle and then also take his opponent's back, which is something I really like. He just is a below average striker, though. I just think that he does not have the ability in terms of the striking to be in the UFC. He does have the ability to work in combos, but they just do not flow the best. I feel like he's a little rigid in his striking. He's tough and he's durable, which is something that I like. But if you saw the last fight, I feel like he gassed out against Trevin Giles, which is something that I don't like to see, which is why it was like a close split up, right? I mean, split the loss. So, given all of that, I just don't know where Preston Parsons is going to go because he does have some good attributes, but he does have some detriments as well. And Semi the Jedi, I mean, the one thing that I do know about this guy is that he's going to continue to move forward and pressure his opponent. He has huge power, I believe, in both hands. He's able to pressure opponents with high volume and pace and just power, try to break down his opposition with this pressure. He can counter pretty well too, but he is also prone to being countered himself by higher level strikers. But I don't think he has to worry about that in this fight. Semelsberger also has okay grappling and wrestling. He likes to work this in when his opponents are weak or gassed in that area. This fight could really go either way for me. With the short notice, the matchup here, I could see this fight going two ways. So I can see Semi the Jedi brawling his way to a KO or decision victory. Or I could see Preston Parsons implementing a similar game plan that Jeremiah Wells had when he beat Semi the Jedi by split decision. Because if you remember that, Semi the Jedi dropped Wells, I think a couple of times in that fight, but Wells pretty much controlled Semi the Jedi throughout the fight. So it was a close split decision there. For me, and just my personal preference, I'm going to lean towards the fighter who has higher finishing equity on the feet, where every fight starts. So I'm leaning towards Semi the Jedi here by KO. I just do not trust him enough to put him in a potential parlay or kind of play even because I'm probably going to pass on this fight just because of short notice. I could easily see him getting grounded by Preston Parsons. So I'm probably going to stay away from this and just watch it, see what happens. But that's going to be my pick. Semi the Jedi by KO. Low confidence. uh, Next fight that we have, and this is going to be the feature prelim of the night. It's going to be Andrei Arlovski versus Waldo Cortes-Acosta. Andrei Arlovski, we got to give some props to this man. He is 44 years old. He used to be the former heavyweight champion, 34-22 in that division. That is crazy. He is 3-2 in his last five. Unfortunately, those last two losses were just finishes. Where he got finished, he got knocked out by Dontel Mays in his last loss. Not a good look there. He's fighting against Waldo Cortes-Acosta, Salsa Boy, 10-1. He's 4-1 in his last five, coming off of that knockout victory over Lucas Bresky. He is going to be obviously the younger fighter here, and in terms of frame, a slightly larger fighter as well. Odds for this fight, I think it's the second biggest odds on the card. He is out at minus 650 in this fight. Open up at a minus 400. So, I mean, I kind of feel, I feel for Andrei Arlovski. I feel like he checks all the boxes when it comes to skill and just really a skill set needed to succeed in the UFC. He's as I mentioned, former champion. I think he has above average striking skills, good volume for a heavyweight, decent leg kicks. He also surprisingly moves pretty well at 44, sorry. And he is quick with his footwork as a heavyweight. The one thing that he does do, this gets worse with age, is that he leaves his chin open at times. And at age 44, with his chin and durability being deteriorated with each fight, each sparring session, I just do not believe that he's able to take these clean shots any longer on that chin. And we saw that play out in his last fight against Dontel Mays. Andrei is also not much of a grappler, but he does sport a decent 76% takedown defense, which is not too bad at all. I think that, in this fight, though, it's not going to matter too much against a guy like Waldo Cortes-Acosta. I mean, Waldo Cortes is an up-and-coming young heavyweight prospect. I think that I gathered this. He used to be a baseball player or a baseball prospect, so he does have good athleticism, not just a fighter. He's mainly a boxer when he gets in the cage. Pretty clean and quick jab, high volume for a heavyweight. I also think that he has above average movement and flows pretty well in the cage. Absolutely no leg kick defense though. He would just eat leg kicks and just kind of sacrifice his legs to continue to volume box. He also has a below average takedown defense at 60%. But like I mentioned, I don't think Andrei is much of a grappler, so I don't think that this fight's going to be a grappling session. It's going to be more of a stand-up battle. And if that is the case, I think that Waldo will most likely dance around, maybe do some salsa dancing, and just pop Andrei throughout the fight. I think that this is probably going to be competitive in the beginning. However, the longer the fight goes, I just think that Andrei's age will catch up to him, and he will eat punches to the chin until he can no longer handle them. And then we saw with the last fight, I think Waldo does have KO power. He showed that in his last fight. So pick here is Waldo by KO. I'm going back and forth with this. I don't know if I'm going to put him as a parlay piece for now because minus 600 heavyweight fight. I mean, that's sometimes that's begging to lose money right there, right? So I'll see how the weigh-ins look. I mean, I think that Waldo Cortes is going to come in pretty confident. He's probably going to look good in scales as well. But I'm just going to hold off for now because I don't know if I could disrespect the champ like that at these odds. Former champion in Arlovski. So pick here is Waldo Cortes by KO, and I will gather more information as the week goes on. What do you think about this fight between Waldo Cortes and Andrei here?
Waldo by KO. That's my analysis.
Yeah.
No, that's all right. So to put some respect on former champ Arlovski.
Yeah.
He is. Yeah, I just think that Arlovski is just old. I think he should just retire.
Yeah.
Hopefully, he doesn't go on a streak where he looks like a heavyweight Tony Ferguson We should just avoid that. And yeah, I think he's going to be facing a more dangerous, longer striker in Waldo. And yeah, I think Waldo's just much better, much more dangerous than Dontel Mays. And you saw what Dontel Mays did to Andrei. So yeah, like you said, I'm not sure if the leg kicks will matter in this fight. And yeah, I just got Waldo by KO against a 45-year-old Arlovski here. That's how I see it going.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes it's as simple as that. Are you that confident in Waldo to put him in a parlay?
No, I usually don't put uh, fighters who are above minus 400 or
Mm,
minus 450 in parlays. I try to avoid that. I try to keep it below that because sometimes there tends to be traps in
yeah,
in those odds, and I try to avoid that as much as possible. But yeah,
yeah, especially at heavyweight, where anything could happen, pretty much. Totally agreed. So yeah, we'll watch that fight, and hopefully, I mean, maybe for better or worse, a retirement fight, but we'll see what happens. Maybe Andre can turn back the clock for one night. Maybe he can kind of stop this old young kid. So let's move on to the main card, and this is going to be the fight that kicks off the main card. We have Phil Hawes versus Bruno Ferreira. Phil Hawes, his nickname is No Hype. It's a pretty good nickname, not bad. He's 12-5. He is 2-3 in his last five. He's coming off of that KO loss against Ikram Aliskerov, and that was pretty interesting to watch. He's 35. He's facing against Bruno Ferreira, the Hulk, 10-1. He is 4-1 in his last five. 31 years old, so he will be the younger fighter, but Phil Hawes will have the height and reach advantage there. Right now, the odds for this fight, Bruno Ferreira, minus 125. He opened up at a minus 175, actually, and was bet to a plus 130. So people actually took the dog odds on Phil Hawes right away. However, he has since been bet back to minus 125. So it's close to kind of a pick 'em fight for this fight right now. What do you think about this fight between Phil Hawes and Bruno Ferreira? I'm intrigued to kind of understand your breakdown here.
I am kind of torn on this fight here because I think the most skilled fighter on this card is Phil Haas. But the sad part is the fighter with the worst durability on this card is Mr. No Hype, who might change his name to Mr. No Chin. So, man, okay. His last few losses were against high quality fighters, and he was frustrating Ikram and Dolidids, and he was dominating Chris Curtis, but there's a ticking time clock on when his chin just evaporates, even when he's winning those fights. So I really wanted to bet on Phil Haas here, but you just can't trust the chin. So I'm probably just gonna stay away from this fight. But Phil Haas looks great with that offensive pressure,
Mhm.
but he needs the chin to hold up for that, or just turn down the pressure and just use more wrestling. But he likes to just continue to have that pressure and just kind of basically just dance on his opponents and just touch him up. And he looks dominating at times and looks really good, but yeah, his downfall is that chin of his that hasn't been able to hold up in that type of offensive pressure. And I think the only way that he could win this is if he incorporates wrestling a lot more and turn down the pressure a bit. But I don't think that we'll see that happening. I think we'll see the same phenomenal offensive pressure, Phil Haas. And as for Bruno Ferreira, man, UFC is not giving Phil Haas any favors.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like Phil Haas will just lap a guy who grapples or is a submission artist, or give him a point fighter who has been looking dominant. But nope, UFC said, "Hey, we'll just throw in a one punch finisher in front of you." So no favors for Phil Haas here. He's facing Bruno, who has one punch power. He is going to be shorter and has a length disadvantage, but he is explosive. He likes to have that kind of switch stance here, so maybe give Phil Haas some trouble a little bit. But the way I see this, I think early on, I'm just gonna watch, and in round one, we could literally see a Phil Haas clinic in
Mm.
round one. He's just dominating Ferreira, right? Touching him up. Ferreira can't really show any offense. And man, I think I'm considering maybe live betting this. If this goes past round one, Phil Haas looks good. Bruno's at underdog odds. I might put some on Bruno before round two starts, just for the imminent Phil Haas chin to evaporate. But otherwise, I'm not gonna play this fight. And yeah, those are my thoughts.
Yeah, like you mentioned, I mean, Phil Hall's classic definition of a glass cannon fighter, all the skills in the world to be elite in the UFC, especially at the middleweight division. Good kickboxer, has a good wrestling skill set and pedigree as well. I really like his powerful hands. He's really quick in his movement, fluid in his attacks. He can piece people up in combos as well. It's just that he just has no chin left, I think. He's been KO'd in his last three losses. He did have a KO win in between versus Duran win, but I mean that's not exactly a UFC caliber fighter in my opinion. He also has a top tier wrestler. I mean, he's good takedown defense. I don't think he's ever been taken down yet in the UFC. 100% takedown defense. Able to shoot double legs, single legs. He has a 36% takedown accuracy. Averages about 2.28 takedowns per 15 minutes. Utilizes top control pretty well and can ground and pound his opponents on top as well. I think he's a high level athlete. I mean, he just does not have the best chin nor the best gas tank. He gets more slow and timid the later the fight goes on. And the guy against a guy like Bruno Ferreira, I mean, I think that Bruno is actually a good striker at middleweight. However, he does have chin issues himself. And we saw that in the last fight, right? And that kind of caught me off guard because I thought that he was going to come in and beat that guy. I can't pronounce his name, but he's like this big 6'5" kind of middleweight, and he just got KO'd. So, he Bruno has huge power in his hands as well. He can one shot KO people like he did against RoboCop, Gregory Rodriguez. I think that Bruno can move in and out in movement in different directions as well. He's able to use feints and can fight out of southpaw, orthodox. I think he's pretty well rounded in terms of that. Grappling wise, I think it's decent, but obviously not his bread and butter. This guy's looking to KO people. He does have the ability to unleash devastating ground and pound once on top, though. The way I see this fight going is that, given both their skill sets, how they're gonna match up, I think that Phil Hawes is going to do really well actually in the beginning. I think that he's going to be piecing up Bruno with nice 1-2s, some kicks as well. However, I just think that eventually Bruno will catch him with a clean power shot, and he's going to KO him like he did against RoboCop. And I think it's going to play out similar to how Phil Hawes got KO'd by Ikram, because I do remember that I was on the Ikram side of that fight, but I do remember that Ikram was having trouble with Phil Hawes. I mean, it was a tough fight for as long as it lasted. And then he just caught a power shot to the chin, and it was all she wrote. So pick here is going to be Bruno by KO. However, I can't trust him because I think that Bruno's chinny himself. So I'm just going to stay away from, backing either fighter. The play that I actually like is the under 1.5 rounds. It's minus 225 right now on Bet Online, and I think it could be a decent play potential parlay piece. So I think both of these guys are prone to self-destruct, and I think the under could be a good play. The only way that this under doesn't kind of play out is that if, I think Phil Hawes incorporates more of a wrestling kind of base game plan and just doesn't get pieced up. So that could be something that I'll take to account, but I think that both these guys are probably going to go for the finish, and we'll see what happens there. Moving on to the next fight on the main card, we have Ricky Simón versus Mario Bautista. Ricky Simón, 20-4. He is 4-1 in his last five. He's coming off that knockout loss to Song Yadong. He's fighting against Mario Bautista, 13-2, 5-0 in his last five. And he's coming off that decision victory over Damon Blackshear, which I remember it was kind of a closer fight than I thought. I thought that Damon had some good moments there. Mario obviously had some good moments as well. Both these guys are similar ages, and Mario will be the taller fighter, but Ricky does have a 1-inch reach advantage here. Odds for this fight: Ricky Simón is -180, opened up at a -225. And yeah, it's interesting that people took dog odds on Mario Bautista right away. How I see this fight going: first off, let's go with Ricky Simón. He's a high pressure grappler, relentless gas tank for wrestling. I think Simón is also just in terms of skill, I think he's solid at wrestling, but it is his sheer strength and commitment to the takedowns that separates him from the rest of the pack at 135. He has high takedown volume, 5.84 takedowns landed per minute, per 15 minutes. And he has a 50% takedown accuracy, 75% takedown defense. So solid all around in terms of the takedowns, grappling. He also has good cop control once his opponents are taken down. However, he does average 5.84 takedowns a fight, so he has a tendency to let his opponents back up if he doesn't finish them. He prefers to go with the finish with subs once he's on the ground, so it leads to his opponents having opportunities to get back up because he prioritizes submission over position. So that's why his opponents get a chance to get back up. But he does have a pretty good sub game, and he can finish opponents there. I think that Simón also has slightly above average striking, very improved since he's been in the UFC. When he first came in, didn't really have that great of a striking, but I think it's improved a lot since he's been in there. He does a great job of constantly moving forward with power behind his shots. He usually likes to strike to set up his takedowns, and this may not work when he is fighting against someone who could sprawl and brawl with the best of him, like his last KO loss against Song Yadong. Mario Bautista, I think he's a good all-around fighter with plus marks in all area of MMA. I think that his striking, I feel like he moves pretty well in the cage. His good volume, especially for the 135-pound division. I also think that he has decent power behind his attacks. His striking defense could use some work because I think that, especially with his height at 5'9", that's a little taller for 135. I think that he leaves his head and just chin up in the air for a pretty long time. So he has a tendency to do that. And that rings kind of true because if you look at his striking defense, it's lower than Ricky Simón's. He has a striking defense percentage of 53%. Simón has 62% striking defense. I think that Mario is a better grappler than he's a striker, though. He's able to maneuver into subs easily in grappling exchanges and the scrambles. I also think that he has a good frame and length for the division, so he can get subs pretty easily, especially in like choke situations. He's a pretty good choker there. I think that Ricky will be able to come back and show Mario that there are levels to the aggression and just wrestling prowess overall. Mario may have a more well-rounded skill set, but I think that Ricky will just be more relentless, and I don't think that Mario will be able to punish Ricky like Song Yadong did on the feet to deter Ricky's game plan. Mario has a below average 50% takedown defense. So he has been taken down in the past. Actually, sorry, 56%, which is still not that great. So I could see Ricky taking him down and controlling Mario on the ground. Aside from Mario catching Ricky on the ground with a sub, I think that Ricky will control Mario on the ground for a decision win. And that's going to be my pick. Ricky by decision will probably look to attack the over 2.5 actually, rather than back Simón, because I think this could be a close fight. And right now, the over 2.5 is minus 170, and Simone is minus 180 right now. So you can play either way, but I feel like I'm more confident in the over hitting rather than Ricky, backing Ricky as a money line. So I think it's going to go the distance either way. Pick here's Ricky by decision, and I'll probably look to attack the over 2.5 instead. Gerard, what are your thoughts on this fight between Ricky Simone and Mario Bautista here?
I think Ricky, obviously, he's going to have the better experience and the better resume and opponent of fighters. And Mario only has that, in my opinion, that Black Shear win, who a lot of people think is a loss. And I think Blackshear did enough to win that myself. Um, Ricky Simone has that proven wrestling. He's relentless with it. Um, the one thing that I do worry is in I don't know if there will be close rounds, but if there are close rounds, and if we see if Mario somehow gets Simone to back up at times, which we saw against Song Yadong, but I think that was probably mostly because of the danger that Song Yadong posed to Simone in the stand up. Um, I'm not sure if Mario could do something similar or catch something big on Simone, but I think if there were close rounds, uh, and both fighters aren't really scoring, and both fighters are taking attempts to get them their opponent on the ground and getting back up. I just think Mario kind of he looks like he fights through those losing positions better than most fighters
Hmm.
here, and being that for his size and length, he's able to maneuver through things. And even though he's not scoring, even that maybe it looks good to the judges, even if the other fighter scored a little bit more in the round. So that's one thing that I wanted to take a note of here. And yeah, if there's any like close rounds, I don't know how the judges are going to score it. If they like Mario Batista's, I would say Batista Mario doesn't look like he takes too much damage, even though his it shows on the stat his defense is 53% or something like that. And I think I'm just gonna stay away from this fight for now, even though I am picking Ricky to win this. Uh, I don't know. I just have a feeling that this could get kind of kind of weird if this ends up being a close fight, which I think it can end up being a close fight with possibly both the wrestling kind of stalling each other out here and having some close rounds. So for now, I'm going to stay away, even though I think Ricky's going to be the more, uh, he has the more proven pedigree and skills and what we've seen from him in the past. But yeah, those are my thoughts.
Do you think this fight's going decision?
I think there's a pretty good chance this goes to a decision. Yeah,
Cool. Okay.
I'm not so sure if either fighter can find a submission on each other.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think it's going to be a decision fight personally. So that's why I'm backing the over 2.5. I agree with you. I feel like Mario he's live on the ground versus Ricky's also live on the ground. So we might just see like a nice little scrambling session for both fighters, and hopefully that takes us down to the clock. So that's what I'm
Mhm.
hoping for. Let's move on to the next fight on the main card. It is going to be the return of the UFC legend himself, Jim Miller versus Gabriel Benítez. Jim Miller, A10 is his nickname. He is 36 and 17, 4 and 1 in his last five. He's coming off that KO victory against Jesse Butler. Very fun win that we witnessed. He's 40 years old, so he's one of the older fighters on the roster, and especially at lightweight. He's fighting against Gabriel Benítez, 23 and 10. He is 2 and 3 in his last five, coming off that KO victory against Charlie Ontiveros. I believe that's how you say the name, but I remember that guy. That guy's not that great. um, Gabriel is 35 himself, so he's no spring chicken. I mean, both these guys are kind of vets in the MMA space and in the UFC space in particular. They actually both have the same measurables at 5'8" and 71-inch reach. So interesting little tidbit there. Jim Miller is right now a minus 119 favorite, opened up at a plus 120. So some people were instantly taking some dog action on UFC legend Jim Miller, and now he's a slight favorite. So it's kind of like a pick 'em fight, in my opinion. Right now, I mean, I'll kick it off to you, Gerard. I'm really intrigued to hear what you have to say about this. What do you think about Jim Miller and Gabriel Benítez here?
For this fight, they both feel kind of old to me, right? But Jim Miller has been the more active older guy, and in these past few fights of his, it seems like he's been able to hold up his skill set, and his power has been able to show through in these fights. And I think he's still pretty dangerous even at 40. Um, as far as Gabriel, just looking at his his record and his past few fights and how it seems very inactive to me, it almost feels like Gabriel's actually the older guy here. Um, so this long layoff, I think this might be a bad um, thing for Gabriel here, facing Jim Miller, who's been more active. Gabriel does have those leg kicks. He has nice leg kicks, and he could use that against Jim Miller. But I do think that Jim Miller's power and his his dangerousness in this fight will be able to keep Gabriel off in this fight, in terms of Gabriel trying to force things and getting too overly aggressive. But then again, he might just go for it because I don't know if he'll be able to fight for longer rounds at his age. I think Gabriel tries to finish fights usually here. So, and because of that, I think that'll open him up for a Jim Miller knockout, is what I'm seeing here. But I'm at a low to medium confidence on Jim Miller, and that's my pick for this fight.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's extremely. I know that Jim Miller is a UFC veteran. He's been fighting since 2008 in the UFC, and he fought at UFC 100, fought at UFC 200, trying to fight at UFC 300. So this guy's just been fighting for a very long time in that division, especially. I think over the years, Jim has shown fantastic longevity, improvement in MMA, especially at the UFC level. He started off mainly as a jiu-jitsu fighter who preferred to fight in grappling situations. In present day, in 2024, he has actually become better with age and defied the odds. His striking is more powerful now than what he had in the past. He just has a really good old man strength to him. Fights well in the pocket, actually. Has good leg kicks with pop and speed. Just watch his fight with Dustin Poirier. He really destroyed DP's legs there. He has good grappling as well. I mean, his background's in jiu-jitsu. He's shown to have those skills in the cage. 11 subs in the UFC, so nearly half of his wins in the UFC have come by sub. I think that Jim's one weak point at this point, and it's nothing against him. I mean, I think his cardio and gas tank are a little lessened with the age, right? His last decision win was in 2016, and his only wins since then have come via finish. So he's 8-11 UFC decisions. I mean, I don't, and obviously this does not get better with age. I think the cardio and gas tank are things that go once you age. So he's been mainly just finishing people for the wins, right? I think Gabriel is also a solid all round skill set in striking and grappling. Lately, he's been more so of a striker, able to move well, quick kicks, likes to hunt for KOs and finishes himself. Like I mentioned, he has a decent jiu-jitsu kind of skill set, but he also has a tendency to be taken down as well. I think Gabriel's a bit of a glass cannon, like a la Phil Hawes. Three of his last four losses were KO losses. I see this fight playing out in this regard. I think that Jim and Gabriel will get into a firefight, especially, I mean, I feel like Gabriel's been, like you said, really inactive. His last fight was like a year and a half ago. So I just feel like both of these
Mhm.
guys are just going to come out swinging and banging. And Jim and Gabriel, they're going to bring that out in each other. So there's going to be a firefight. Jim's going to come out on top, I think, just because he has better durability and chin at this point. However, if Jim does not finish Gabriel within 2 rounds, I think Gabriel, just being the younger guy, having a better gas tank, I think that he could take over and win via decision like Alex Hernandez did. Maybe not as convincingly as Hernandez did, because Hernandez is kind of in the prime of his career in terms of just his physicality. But I think that it could be close enough where I'm probably going to stay away from this fight. I pick here is Jim Miller inside the distance, but I'm probably staying away from this just because I just don't like being in the habit of backing a, you know, 40-year-old Jim Miller at this point. I mean, I'm rooting for him. I think that he'll get it done, but not a place where I would necessarily put my units, if you know what I mean. Let's move on to the next fight. It's going to be the co-main event of the evening. And before we do, wanted to just tell everybody, peer pickers, please like, comment, and subscribe. Really helps out for the future production of these videos, helps out for the brand as well. And we got a lot more things cooking as well in the future. So please just like, comment, subscribe. Really help us out in that regard. Co-main event is going to be Matheus Nicolau versus Manel Cap. This is going to be actually the second time that they're fighting. So kind of a rematch, if you will. I think that right now, Matheus Nicolau, he is 19-3 and 1. I think that he's coming off of the loss against Brandon Royval there. He's fighting against Manel Cap, who is 19-6, and he's coming off of a decision victory against Felipe dos Santos, who's I believe he's like a young guy, so he came in short notice, and Cop just kind of took care of business there. Um, yeah, I mean they're both kind of the same age. Their measurables are pretty similar as well. I think that the first fight, it was a split decision loss, right, for Manel Cap. So it was a close fight. They just fought like 3 years ago, actually. So this is going to be a rematch here. I mean, the odds for this fight right now, Manel Cap is minus 270, opened up at a minus 210. So, people think that Manel has improved a lot since then and may have Matheus Nicolau's number for this rematch. Let's start off with Nicolau. I think that Nicolau is a technical striker, good skill set in the ground as well. I think he's overall a very clean fighter. Likes to fight methodically, take his time. I think that his striking is just clean and technical. Likes to pick his shots in the striking exchanges. Able to move in the cage pretty well. I think his style just tends to be very low volume though, more low volume than other flyweights. His grappling is also good. He has good takedowns, good takedown defense. He lands 1.48 takedowns landed per 15 minutes, 45% takedown accuracy. And he also has a 93% takedown defense. So something is pretty cool there. He has a pretty good takedown defense. I also think that he's able to transition pretty well when he's on the ground, especially in top control, and stay there. He's one of those fighters that prefers to keep the position and does not hunt for subs too often. And this is reflected in his record. Only one submission victory in the UFC, 5 decision wins, right? So this guy is just like kind of like a computer, if you will, the AI, right? This guy fights very safe and clean. I think Kop's also a Manel Cop, high level striker. I actually think he has a fun style to watch when he just lets his kind of attacks go, right? He's really quick and fast with his attacks. He moves in the cage pretty quick as well. He can also play that game of picking his shots and setting up some really powerful shots, good feints, but he does have a tendency to sometimes get into low volume exchanges as well. I think Cap is also a decent wrestler. I think when he implements his game plan, he actually does do pretty well there. But I feel like he likes to work more so in the clinch and set up some dirty boxing or Muay Thai strikes instead. Unfortunately, I feel like this fight is going to be a snooze fest. I feel like both guys are going to be too patient with their approach, looking to counter each other. It's going to be a mostly striking matchup, and I see Cap just being a little bit more aggressive. So for now, I'll lean towards Cap. I think that his shots will land with more power as opposed to Nikolau's shots, which will sway the judges. And I feel like momentum is definitely on his side as well. He's been doing pretty well in his last few fights. Matheus Nicolau is coming off of that, knockout loss, right, against Brandon Royval. So, I mean, both these guys are kind of going different directions in their trajectories of their career. And yeah, I'm going with Cap here. I'll say Cap by decision, but I'm just not that confident because he did lose against Nicolau 3 years ago via split decision. So it was a close fight, but I'm probably just going to stay away and watch this fight. Jar, what's your thoughts on Matheus Nicolau and Manel Cap here?
So Matheus, uh, Nicolau has a pretty good counter striking. I noticed that a lot of times he's kind of fighting on the back foot, and then he catches fighters by surprise when he goes for his shots. And like you said, he's super patient, picks his shots. Um, like their first fight, I think an uneventful pace. Unfortunately, if I think that favors Nicolau. If it were go to like an uneventful snooze fest decision, I think that type of fight would lean towards Nicolau, and I don't want to see that because I'm going on Manel. I'm going on Manel. I like Manel. He has that. I think his bravado has to match the the fight. If he talks all this game, all these press conferences, just to have a snooze fest with a rematch with Nicolau, who he already lost to, that he would be one of the most hated people ever, talking all that, all that shit. So, I mean, I like Manel Cop here. Um, he also has good counter striking, and when I watch him, he almost looks like he's seeing things in slow motion at times, and he's like kind of in that Matrix mode, and he's moving like the chosen one. That's why he dances a lot at times and showboats a little bit in his fights. He has that confidence, but unfortunately, when he faces Nicolau in that first round, he was that wasn't the case. His bravado wasn't there. He was overly cautious, and he was on the back foot against Nicolau in that first round. And I was confused when I was watching that. I was like, "What is going on?" Even though I already knew Nicolau won that, but that was a weird thing to see coming from Manel Cop. And man, Manel Cop, he looks great when he decides to pressure. And in that first fight, he should have pressured more, like how he did in his most recent fights. Um, and he could have won that fight against Nicolau. I think he had the better striking exchanges in their last fight, but the judges gave it to Nicolau, who was able to counter with some takedowns and use some of those counter offense where he's not aggressive. He's like you said, he's like a computer. He's like an AI fighter. And this fight, I'm looking for Manel Cop to finally match that bravado of his, because he needs this big highlight finish against Nicolau to get that big title shot. And being the smart guy and knowing his position in the UFC right now, I think he knows that he should look to find the finish against Nicolau to really supplant his name in in the division. So yeah, my pick here is Cop, and I think he should. I'm hoping that he's looking for the finish because I got him getting the finish against Nicolau in this fight. So that's my pick.
How confident are you in that pick? Are you, willing to shell out some units for this guy? Parlay piece? Like, how
Yeah,
confident do you feel?
yeah, he's one of my parlay pieces. Manel Cop's one of yeah.
Godspeed. I like Cop too. I feel like he's one of the best trash talkers in the UFC right now. I've been telling people about this. Just check out this guy's Twitter. It is like this guy is wild. So I really like how he kind of gets into the heads of his opponents. So I'm rooting for him. Let's see what happens. Yeah, I'm just excited to see how this fight goes. But if it's at all is like a snooze fest, then I might tune out. I don't know. Yeah, watching that first fight, it just was not that good of a fight. Uh, let's move on to the main event of the card. The fight that the whole card is centered around is going to be the rematch of Magomed Ankalaev versus Johnny Walker. So they're going to face off for that controversial kind of no contest where Magomed threw that illegal knee, and the doctor asked Johnny where he was, and he said the desert. So no contest right there, and we're getting a rematch. So Magomed 18-1-1. He is coming off, believe it or not, like a draw and a no contest. So a pretty eventful last year or so for him. He is fighting against Johnny Walker, 27-7, 21-7. He is also coming out that aforementioned kind of no contest against Magomed. But before that, he actually did a decision piece on Anthony Smith there. They're both the same age. Johnny Walker obviously is going to be the taller guy and has a huge reach advantage at 7 inches. Let's go with the odds for this fight. Right now, Magomed is a minus 500, opened up at a minus 550. So, yeah, pretty huge favorite. I think he's the third largest favorite on this card. To tell you about the last fight, the odds, I think that Magomed ended up closing at a minus 400. So people have been on the Magomed train for these last two iterations of this fight, and now they're more so even heavier on this fight. Gerard, I'll let you start off to break down the main event. What do you think about Magomed versus Johnny 2 here?
This is gonna be interesting. I think Johnny Walker was kind of robbed of the DQ win.
Right.
Actually,
I thought it was
he
going to
could
be
have just
DQ.
walked
Yeah,
away
trust me,
with the
I
DQ.
had him in I had Magomed in a parlay, and I was like, man, how lucky there. What? What was that? Yeah,
Yeah, it reminded me of that Malkoon versus Brandon
exactly, exactly.
DQ that Johnny Walker could have walked away with. But yeah, he said the desert. So, so we're doing it back in the Las Vegas desert.
Yep.
um, but I think 8 times out of 10, Ankalaev should win this. Um, Ankalaev, he's probably the most well-rounded light heavyweight in the division, I would say. And now this is going to be at a smaller cage, so I think that does favor Ankalaev. Less room for Johnny Walker to keep a distance in this fight and use that range. Um, I think you should have like the same game plan that I spoke of in the past. Johnny Walker should use those leg kicks, keep Ankalaev in range, and Walker does have that kind of wild card about him where he can mix in weird strikes, different angles. He has a freak of a frame and super athletic. And he almost, I thought he could have also finished the fight with that surprise knee that Ankalaev saw.
Hmm.
But I think now Ankalaev, now that he's been in there with Walker, he might be privy to kind of the dangers that Walker might try on him. So obviously my pick here is Ankalaev, but I'm probably going to stay away just because I don't like the odds. But yeah, I think 8 times out of 10, Ankalaev should win this.
Understood. Yeah, I mean, Magomed, great all around 205er. Excellent striking, technical, one of the cleanest kickboxers at 205. I think that he has fast, quick kicks, good accuracy as well. He can really do some good work in combos and boxing and kickboxing, stay safe throughout the fight as well. However, the fight where he didn't stay safe was when he ate a fair amount of leg kicks versus Jan Blachowicz. So that's something to note there. Magomed also has pretty good grappling. Even when you factor in his kickboxing kind of background, he has a great takedown defense of 86%. He's able to obtain good top control as well, control his opponents. He has good winning IQ. That's why I like to call it. Jan destroyed his legs, and he changed his game plan mid-fight in the fight, right? And his game plan was to wrestle Jan to a controversial draw. So, given all that, I mean, in a fight against a guy like Johnny Walker, who's a beast of a 205er, just due to his unique frame and athleticism, I just feel that even though Walker has a explosive KO power, he's able to strike in high volume when he sees an opening, but that was more so early on in his career as opposed to now. He has been fighting a little bit more conventional in recent fights. I think that in order to win this fight, he needs to be a bit more wild and non-conventional and bring back the Johnny Walker of old, because if he tries to kickbox against a guy like Magomed, who is a just gifted and decorated kickboxer, I think he's going to be in for a world of hurt, because I feel like Magomed has him covered pretty much in all facets of MMA, except for that wild card ability, right? I think that the first fight, it ended in a controversial no contest due to that illegal knee. I think that because of how the first fight played out, I think Walker will attempt to fight a patient and measured fight again. Unfortunately, I don't think he's going to be more wild, because if you look at the record, I mean, his last few fights, he's been doing pretty well. Coming off of a decision victory against Anthony Smith, knocked out Paul Craig, submitted Ion Cutelaba. I mean, he's on a 3-fight winning streak aside from that no contest for that legal knee. So I think he's going to try to do the same game plan again. And I don't think that he's going to be wild, which is what he needs to do to be able to knock out a guy like Magomed. So I could see Magomed just kickboxing with him, kind of like a little sparring session, and then he's going to eventually catch Johnny Walker with some clean shots and just knock Johnny Walker out. Or I think Magomed also has this in his back pocket where he can take down Johnny Walker and control him just like he did Jan. So because of all of that, I just feel that Magomed just has this guy covered in all facets. I like to call that as a lock, in my opinion. I'm coming back for more. Last time we couldn't quite close it out just because it was a no contest, but yeah, give me back the Giga lock for this. I think Magomed's coming back, and I think he's gonna right some wrongs here, because the thing that I like about Magomed is, let's go back to the Ion Cutelaba rivalry, right? First fight, he was piecing up Ion. Ion was kind of stumbling all over the place, and then the judge did an early kind of stoppage because Ion was still throwing punches. I agree it was early, but in the second fight, once Magomed downloaded all the information, he just smoked Ion Cutelaba, and he made sure that this guy didn't have any business being in the octagon with him. And I feel like the same thing's about to happen to Johnny Walker, unfortunately. I'm actually going to root for Johnny Walker because I think he's a fun personality. He's a good dude from what I've seen in terms of some of his interviews, but sometimes you're running into just a beast, and I think Magomed's just going to outbeast this guy in terms of his pure kickboxing. So give me Magomed's a Giga lock, and we're going to end off the breakdown with that. This has been the Fight Night breakdown for Magomed Ankalaev versus Johnny Walker, and I wish everyone best of luck for the whole fights. I wish everybody good profit, make some plays out there. Before we wrap up, Gerard, do you have any final thoughts on this card as a whole or anything at all?
I'm just ready and excited for 2024. Last year was the warm up. This year's sharp season. So let's get it.
Definitely. Let's do it. And it's going to be this Saturday at 4 p.m. Eastern. So it's going to be somewhat of an early card. Please tune in at ESPN Plus or, Stream East if you have it. Um, we'll be back for the best bets video for Alex later on this week. Until then, best of luck, everybody. And we'll see you guys soon.